Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another Season 7 League of Legends Champion Guide. Today I'm going to be covering Ornn, the Fire Below the Mountain.
Fine, we go.
Alright, so let's hop right into the guide by looking at his pros and cons. So first off the top, Ornn is a very tanky champion. He's definitely known as a true tank, and he can sit on the front lines for a very long time. Ornn is also a champion with really good crowd control, and he can even make it last longer with his debuff, Brittle. This debuff even works with his allies, so as long as you have some crowd controllers on your team, you can CC them for very long durations. It's also going to be fairly easy to farm on Ornn because he does have multiple AoEs in his kit. Next, Ornn has an ultimate that's very strong in team fights. If his ultimate's used on a clumped up team, he has the opportunity to knock up an entire team, which obviously can be pretty devastating. Finally, the thing that makes Ornn very unique is the fact that he can buy items on the go. Gone are the days of backing to buy your items as long as you're playing Ornn. Now with all that said, Ornn obviously has a bunch of cons as well. He's a champion that has some pretty damn low mobility and a lot of hard matchups. If you head over to champion.gg right now and look at his matchups, they're not very good. Finally, Ornn also has some early mana issues. He would be a pretty decent laner if he could spam his abilities over and over again, but with those mana costs, it's not very possible. As for my masteries, I like to go 18 Resolve and 12 Ferocity, grabbing Grasp of the Undying as my keystone mastery. Ornn is a champion that usually likes to slug it out in the top lane with his opponent, and Grasp of the Undying is going to add some really nice sustain for you in those trades. Now since Ornn is obviously a champion with crowd controls, you could always go for Courage of the Colossus for its shield, but I usually find I get a lot more from Grasp of the Undying. I then like to get 12 Ferocity just to increase my damage output a little bit, but you could always go 12 Cunning as well and get the mana regeneration. As I mentioned on the cons page, he is very mana hungry, and that mana regeneration is something that is pretty valuable, and I do see a lot of Ornns go for it, so it's up to you. Either go 12 Ferocity for increased damage, or 12 Cunning for mana regeneration. For my rune setup, I like to go for attack damage reds, scaling health yellows, magic resist blues, and armor quintessences. You're going to get a ton of early tankiness from the scaling health, magic resist, and armor, but you're also going to increase your damage just a little bit with the attack damage. That of course will make last hitting just a little bit easier, and your trades just a little bit more effective. You do of course also have the option of going for armor yellows and then getting attack speed quints if you want to make your trades a little bit better, but this tanky setup is definitely my favorite on Ornn. You're going to be very hard to push out of lane, and farming is usually not going to be an issue. For my summoner spells, I like to stay very standard and stick with Teleport and Flash. Flash is a requirement on Ornn because it can be used throughout the game to save his life when he does get stuck in a bad situation. Flash is even able to be used offensively so you can get closer to the enemy champions and crowd control them. It's easily the most versatile spell, and it is a must grab. Teleport is then the best option for your second summoner spell because it will allow you to quickly join teamfights and objectives while you do split push in a side lane. It's also very strong if you're in a hard matchup, so you can teleport back to lane if you do get bullied out and you have to heal. Ornn's passive is Living Forge, and this allows him to build items anywhere on the map and can also allow his teammates to get masterwork upgrades. Ornn can purchase non-consumable items from anywhere on the field by forging them himself, and is also presented a forge menu with his recommended items to select to be forged. Forging takes 4 seconds, and the process is interrupted if Ornn enters combat, disabling Living Forge. Ornn and each of his teammates can also purchase masterwork upgrades. Each player, however, can only have one masterwork upgrade at a time. So this is a pretty damn cool passive because he doesn't even have to back to actually buy his items. This passive can allow you to get some early items in the lane phase and give you a really nice advantage. Now since your teammates can also get masterwork upgrades, it's also a fantastic late game passive. In theory, in the very late game, your team is going to have an advantage because they can upgrade their items once, and the enemy team obviously will not be able to. The second part of your passive is called Brittle. Bellows Breath's Final Flame and Call of the Forge God apply Brittle to enemies for 6 seconds. Ornn's next basic attack against the Brittle target consumes the mark, briefly knocking them back. The next immobilizing effect against a Brittle target consumes the mark, dealing between 7 and 16% based on level of the target's maximum health as bonus magic damage, and lasts 30% longer. So this is incredibly strong because 7 to 16% of the target's maximum health is pretty damn big, and a 30% increased CC is huge. Therefore, as long as Ornn is on a team with a lot of crowd control, this has the potential to do a lot of damage. All you pretty much have to do in teamfights is try to hit as many targets with your ultimate as possible, and of course hit them with the Final Flame from Bellows Breath. Ornn's Q ability is Volcanic Rupture, and this does some pretty significant damage that also slows the enemy and makes an impassable Magma Pillar. When activated, Ornn slams his hammer into the ground, sending a fissure in the target direction that stops early if an enemy champion is hit, dealing physical damage and slowing enemies hit for 2 seconds. After a 1.25 second delay, an impassable magma pillar erupts at maximum range for 4 seconds. So this ability here has a 100% AD ratio and a scaling slow duration, so it's definitely a very strong ability. In the lane phase, you'll be able to use this to last hit minions and still poke the enemy champion at the same time. Since this does also slow the enemy and make an impassable magma pillar, it's also great to hold a target in a spot. So therefore, when engaging onto an enemy, try to land this ability and then you can stun them with your E. Your W ability is Bellows Breath, and this is your main way of applying Brittle, and it also does some really nice AoE damage while also shielding you. When activated, Ornn shields himself for 12% of his maximum health for 4 seconds and marches unstoppably in the target direction over the next 2.5 seconds. Over the march, he belches fire over a cone in front of him, dealing magic damage every 0.5 seconds to enemies hit. The final bout of flame will also apply Brittle. Now this ability also does percent of target's current health damage, which does scale, so I like to max this ability first usually. To make sure you have a higher chance of applying Brittle, I usually like to follow this after my Q ability because it will slow them, and of course they will take this damage pretty much no matter what. It's also fantastic in trades because not only does it do some pretty significant damage, it also shields you. Keep in mind that this shield is based off your maximum health, so if you do have a Gargoyle Stone Plate, you'll want to activate that first to get a massive amount of health and then use the shield. Ornn's E ability is Searing Charge, and this is a great way to close a gap on an enemy champion and crowd control them as long as they're against terrain. When activated, Ornn charges forward, dealing physical damage to enemies he passes through, stopping upon colliding with terrain. If Ornn collides with the terrain while charging, he creates a shockwave that deals increased physical damage and knocks up enemies within for 1 second. Searing Charge can damage enemies twice. The damage here is based off your bonus armor and magic resist, so once you are a very tanky champion, this can do a pretty significant amount of damage. Whenever possible, you want to use this against a wall on an enemy champion so you can easily trade a bunch of damage. Basically, act as if you are a Poppy. Now the cool thing about Ornn is he can make his own terrain with his Q ability. Therefore, hitting an enemy champion with your Q ability and following it up with your E ability is a very common combo. Keep in mind you also combo very well with stuff like Anivia, things that create walls work fantastic with Ornn. Your ultimate is Call of the Forge God, which is a great way to get Brittle on multiple targets and can knock up an entire team. On first cast, Ornn summons an elemental at maximum range in the target direction that stampedes towards him, dealing magic damage and slowing enemies hit by 40% for 2 seconds. While stampeding, Ornn can reactivate Call of the Forge God. So, on that second cast, Ornn dashes forward in the target direction. If Ornn collides with the elemental, he headbutts it, sending it stampeding again in the new direction and empowering it to knock up enemies hit. Call of the Forge God can damage enemies twice. Now this ultimate, however, only has a 20% AP ratio, so even if it hits twice, it's not going to do a lot of damage. It is, however, still pretty fantastic because it can slow multiple targets by 40% and also get Brittle on top of all of them, making them take increased duration from crowd control. On the second cast, it of course also knocks up all enemies hit, so in teamfights it can be pretty devastating if you can knock up an entire team. For your skill order, you first want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can at 6, 11, and 16. Then I like to start maxing my W ability first. It has scaling percent health damage, and as long as you can get all the ticks on the enemy champion, it can do some pretty significant damage. I then like to follow it up with my Q ability because it does have a 100% AD ratio and also does a lot of damage. Your E is also a really strong ability as well, and you can definitely max that one second instead of your Q. The choice is up to you. In most cases, I'll just take an early point in my E ability at level 3 so I can actually stun targets. Other than that, save it for last. For the first combo here, we have the most common Q and E combo. All you have to do is hit the enemy with your Q ability and follow up with your E, so when you hit that pillar, they will be knocked up, and then you can follow up with your W ability for damage. Of course, once the enemy champion does have Brittle on them, make sure you follow up with your basic attack so you consume the mark and briefly knock them back. For the next combo, we have the exact same thing, but we open with a teleport gank and use your ultimate later. Once the teleport has been completed, follow up with your Q and E combo, and then of course activate your W. Since you do march unstoppably in the target direction, you will also not be able to CC, and you will be able to get off all your damage. Once the Gragas does try to escape, we activate our R ability twice to knock them up. Unfortunately, he does flash away. During the lane phase, you of course want to first focus on getting as much CS as possible. Once you have some gold, make sure you use your passive to get an item advantage on the enemy top laner, and then trade more aggressively. To harass your opponent, try to do damage from range with your Volcanic Rupture and your Bellows Breath. Whenever possible, use your Searing Charge to knock the enemy into the Magma Pillar from your Volcanic Rupture, or just an ordinary wall. This will make the target take a lot of percent max health damage and also make them take increased crowd control durations. It's a great way to get a bunch of free damage onto your opponent. In teamfights, your main job is going to be to hold down the front line. You're a very tanky champion and it will take a very long time to actually bring you down. You'll then want to try to apply your Brittle on as many enemies as possible with your Bellows Breath or your ultimate. This will deal some nice percent max health damage and also extend the duration of your crowd control. Next, you'll want to try to use your Q and E combo on an enemy in the front line to stun them and make it hard for them to escape because of the terrain created by your Q. Finally, you'll want to use your Call of the Forge God to either chase the enemy, counter-engage, or use it to help you retreat if you are losing the battle. Now let's look at a couple of your hard matchups, and keep in mind there are many more than this, but these are some of the hardest ones. So first up is Singed. This guy you're not going to be able to stick on top of, and he's going to outdamage you with just his Poison Trail. Therefore, to deal with him, you're going to have to get a lot of magic resist early on and just focus on farming. Avoid him as much as you can outside of the lane phase, and just try to get into team fights. Next up, we have Swain, who's a champion that can easily outdamage you and has a lot more sustain. Against him, yet again, try to get a bunch of early magic resist and just focus on farming from ranged if possible with your Q and your W. Just like Singe, try not to fight him too much early on, just get into those team fights where you are a lot stronger. Just try to make it to the very late game where you're pretty much unkillable and your team has an upgraded item. Next up we have Vladimir, and he's a really hard matchup because he's really hard to crowd control. He's going to be able to hold on to his W ability to either stop the knockup from your QE combo or your ultimate. He's going to be able to outtrade you, he has a lot of sustain, and he's an absolute monster in the late game. This matchup's almost unwinnable, you will have to try to bait out his W ability and pray to the gods that you get ganks. And for the last hard matchup, I've got Yasuo. He's a champion you're really going to struggle at trading against because he's very mobile, and of course landing your QE is going to be pretty hard. He's also got an absolute ton of damage, so while you're struggling to land your Q and E combo, he's going to be doing a lot of damage to you. Whenever he does have his Tornado available, you want to make sure you hold on to your W ability because you cannot be knocked up when you do have it on. Alright, with all that stuff covered, let's move on to the item build. So first, if you do need a defensive start, you'll want to go for a Doran's Shield, Health Potion, and a Warding Totem, but if you do need some extra sustain and want increased trading, you want to go for a Corrupting Potion and a Warding Totem. For your core build, you want to go for a Sunfire Cape, Abyssal Mask, and your choice of boots. With your Masterwork upgrade, you will also want to choose one of these core items. If you need to get mostly armor, then of course upgrade the Sunfire Cape, and if you do need mostly magic resist, upgrade the Abyssal Mask. Either way, you will want a Sunfire Cape because the burn damage is great for split pushing, and of course it's going to make you a pretty tanky champion against AD champions. Obviously, the Abyssal Mask is there to make you tanky as well, as it will have some magic resist, and it will also increase your damage. So then for your boots, if you are against a heavy AD team, get the Ninja Tabbies, and against AP and CC heavy teams, get the Merc Treads. For your item pool, we first have the Iceborne Gauntlet. This item is a great way to add a little bit of damage, yet also get some nice tankiness. Now the Gargoyle Stoneplate's also a pretty damn solid item because it's going to make you a very tanky champion, and if you do activate it for its bonus health if people are nearby, if you do activate your W afterwards, you're going to have a massive shield. Then if you do need help engaging, you could of course get the Righteous Glory. This yet again is going to add some nice tankiness and also give you some nice movement speed to engage into the enemy team. If you're looking to get a really high health pool, you could of course get the Warmog's Armor. This also works great with the Gargoyle Stoneplate, so if you're going for the Gargoyle Stoneplate, Warmog's Armor is definitely worth considering. Then if you're against a very heavy AD team, you could get the Thornmail to reflect some damage and also get a nice chunk of armor. If you're looking for some increased health, armor, and a little bit of extra mobility, you could get the Deadman's Plate. And finally, if you do need some magic resist, you could get the Adaptive Helm. This is a great way to reduce damage against champions that spam the same ability over and over again, like a Cassiopeia or a Rise. For my example full build, I take that core build, get some Ninja Tabbies, an Iceborne Gauntlet, Gargoyle Stoneplate, and a Warmog's Armor. You'll do a pretty significant amount of damage because you do have an Iceborne Gauntlet and a bunch of percent health from your kit, and you're also going to be a very hard to bring down champion. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything I've got for top lane Ornn. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you guys did enjoy the video, and please also check out the video description below. I have linked to all my social medias and of course my Twitch and my Discord server as well. If you do need any additional help, please hop into the Discord server. There are many people there that would be glad to help you. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy, have a good day, and peace.